afternoon. That's good. I'm Marion, and I make quilts. I'm from a family of quilters. My great-grandmother made them, my aunts make them, and now I make them. Have any of you ever made quilts? Do you own a quilt? Well, probably you think of them as those warm, cuddly blanket type things that keep you warm. But in the African American tradition, there are also more than that. Sometimes they tell stories. And today, I'm asking you to join me on a quilt journey that tells stories. This first piece you see is called York in the Corps of Discovery. York was the lone African American who participated in the Lewis and Clark expedition. He was the childhood friend and slave of Clark, and he traveled all the way from Missouri to the Pacific Northwest, made the round trip, but still did not receive his freedom. This is another piece that's about history and heritage. It's called Among the Most High, and it tells of the pioneer family, the Bankhead Legrons, who live in Utah. Now, I know most of you don't think about African Americans being in Utah, but this family has been there for over 100 years. This is from photographs of my sister-in-law, Susan. Her family settled there. They originally came as slaves and later served as laborers and farmers. This is a detail of her great-grandfather, Hiram Legron. Continuing to speak of ancestry, this quilt I made in celebration of the Civil War. I call this Waiting for the Freedom Train. When slaves were freed, I'm sure they were struck by bewilderment. I imagine, like many of us, they were unsure what was going to happen next. So when you look at their eyes, you can see them peering out to the present, being like ourselves, wondering where we are going and thinking about where we have been. This piece is called, well, let's see, what is this piece called? Oh yes, Hold My Hand and Make My Bed. I love to collect old things, and I can't pass up a thrift store. So you can see on here I have old aprons, old doilies, there's a child's little jacket, a bib, and I'm celebrating the domestic women in my family and the families of many women who took care of me and took care of children of all races. This is a detail. I love looking at the old photos. That's another thing that's wonderful about quilting today. You get a chance to combine technology and photographs. So I often use old things, including old photographs, in my work. So I love these stately looking women. Now this reminds me of my childhood. I'm from Texas, and I call this Texas back roads. And it looks dusty. When I was a child, we used to go visit my great-grandparents. They had a farm out in the country, and we used to ride on those unpaved roads that looked just like that middle section in our old Oldsmobile. So that's my parents standing in front of the old Oldsmobile. And that's me, little Marion, in front of what was known as a shotgun house. Those are those old houses. It meant that the expression comes from you could shoot straight through. They just went right through from the front door to the back door. So I'm celebrating my past, and I hope you will too. Again, I'm looking at women and important people in my life, and this is my maternal grandmother. Sometimes I move into portraiture, and so I'm presently working on a series showing sisters. So the woman on the white wearing green is my grandmother, Everita, and her sister, Ollie. That's another thing about time past. You know, there are names that are associated with time, and so you can sort of tell the age of a person by their names. Like my name is Marion. It's one of those names that's both for men and women. So sometimes I still get things from Mr. Marion Coleman. Of course, you know I throw that right away. This is called Neighborhood Watch. When I was a child, we relied on the whole neighborhood to keep us safe. So you may have heard the expression, it takes a village to raise a child. This is the same type of expression. I'm showing strong African-American men looking out over us. I have two uncles and my father, and those people who took care of me. Even when I was going to college, my uncle still took me places. As a matter of fact, when I met my husband, my uncle was driving me then too. So it shows you the protective nature, and it kept me safe. Here I'm honoring nurses from the past. I grew up in a generation when we still had polio. I went to school with people who had polio. And I can remember those public health nurses coming to school to give us our shots to protect us against that treacherous disease. So I call this Healing Hands, Caring Hearts, because it was very important to them, as well as our mothers and fathers, that we were all safe and were kept healthy. This is a detail, again, using old photos. Now, this is a case of where I use my imagination. I don't know any of these people, but I collect them. I actively hunt for old photos, and I immediately start to think about stories that I can make up that are about them. This is about Ruby Bridges, civil rights worker. This is a detail. This is May 1959. And this is one of my newest pieces where I included an entire dress. Let's go through this. This is the 70s with my bell bottoms, polyester, dancing to Stevie Wonder. I heard him earlier today. And this is the first African-American president of a women's college, Spelman College, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. It's one of what's known as an historically black college. And of course, we'll end with this piece, which I call Speaking of Women, which shows the Obama women. This is Michelle and her two daughters. And the detail, of course, shows stitch writing, and I write all over them, and this is showing the various other Obama women. So I show you these stories because we all have a story to tell, and I'm hoping you will think of some creative way to tell yours. Thank you for sharing the quilt journey with me.